know, what got you interested in, considering to go into the medical field. So if you want to type it up in the chat or even just unmute, you guys, we're super interested in learning more about who's joining us today.
I always wanted to help people, and I think that was the main reason.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, everyone, we'll give a few more minutes to see if anyone else is going to be joining. And if you just entered the Zoom call, we have this warm-up activity. If you'd like to share in either the chat or unmute yourself and let us know what got you interested into going into the medical field. So Ria just sent a chat to me. So it's been my biggest dream to be able to help people, and I've actually realized biology is interesting as well. Yeah, that's a really great reason. I really loved biology during high school, so that's definitely one of the reasons I got interested in maybe pursuing medicine. And helping other people is definitely a huge plus to that as well.
I think I'm interested in going into the medical field because of the vast, it never ends. You keep learning. It's, it's never boring, if that counts.
Yeah, that's a really great reason. And even as after you graduate from medical school, there's a bunch of continuing education courses that you have to take. So there's never really a point in time where you're not learning something new.
Uh-huh. Yeah, where you stop learning. It's always just you go and go. Cool.
Yeah, so I think we can get started. So we have a medical school student with us here. We are super excited to have her. She's, had a busy time with exams and everything, so it's a great opportunity and honor to have her here with us and to really, get to know her as well. So Alina, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm also going to turn on my camera. I know that not a lot of people have their camera on, but I think it's kind of awkward if you guys can't see me, so I'm going to turn on my camera. So, hey guys, my name is Alina. I graduated from UTD with a biology major in December of 2018, and currently I'm a second year medical student. A couple of my hobbies are listed there, like painting, baking, watching Netflix, recently outdoor activities, just anything really. So yeah, I'm really grateful to be here. I'm really humbled to be here. And I would love to share my experience with you guys, even if it like, you know, if you guys just take one thing away, that'd be amazing. So yeah. So what made me interested in medicine? I think someone had mentioned it as their reason as well, but mine was like, I was really interested in science, like all throughout elementary, middle school, high school. I think that was the one like subject that I guess I could see, feel, touch around me, like history, math, all those. Not to undermine their importance, but like, you know, you're not really actively engaged in them, or at least for me. So that's what kind of got me interested in medicine. So after you complete your undergraduate degree, which you guys are doing right now, medical school is for 4 years. So you apply to you know, medical school at like during your undergraduate, and then usually it depends. So some medical schools within Texas have different curriculums, but it's usually like 1.5 years to 2 years you do didactics, so it's like classroom-based studying, and then the last 2 years you do clinical rotations in different fields. Also, anytime like I'm going through these questions, if I'm going too fast or if y'all don't understand anything, like feel free to type it in the chat, or you can like privately message me in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. I want it to be as engaging as possible. How did I know what major to choose? So funny story, I applied to UTD as a biomedical engineering major and got accepted on like for that major, and then I looked at the classes required for that major about 2 weeks before orientation and realized it was really physics and engineering heavy, which I mean it's in the name, but I didn't actually realize that. So I decided that I couldn't do it because physics was not like my vibe. So I switched my major to healthcare studies, and then a semester in, I realized that I didn't like healthcare studies, so I chose bio. But bottom line of this is choose a major that you're interested in, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a science major like healthcare studies, biology, biomedical engineering, psychology, any of those. If you're interested in art, you know, do an art major. If you're interested in history, do that. Just something that you know that you will do well in, and then like it'll push you as well. But with that same token, if you're not a science major, medical schools do require that you take upper level electives. So you would just have to like pack more upper level electives if you're not a science major. Okay. So the application is holistic, and I know that like as a pre-med, I hated that word because I was like, that doesn't really take me anywhere. But I would say like your MCAT and your GPA are like, you know, for a lot of schools, that's like your first weed out. If you don't have those, then they don't proceed to look at the rest of your application. But with the same token, like if you have a stellar MCAT and a stellar GPA, but you don't have other components like volunteering, shadowing, then that can also like be a hindrance to you getting in. So the first part is like, you know, for the MCAT, is doing well in your like your pre-med classes, right? It's like Gen Chem, OChem, physics, like having that core knowledge, like having a good foundation in that, I think is really helpful. I took the MCAT prep course by Princeton Review at UTD, and it's like a summer, like 3-month course or something. And that really helped. I would recommend it to everyone. And I think as a UTD student, you get like a discount or something. And then besides that, other tips is probably the hardest thing is don't ever compare yourselves to another another pre-med student. I know it's really hard to do because you guys are taking the same classes and you guys have quote unquote the same requirements that are needed to get into medical school, but like you're not them and they're not you. And I think that's like a lifelong advice that I would give to anyone, like regardless of whether you're pre-med or not, is never compare yourself to another individual. You have your strengths and weaknesses, and another person has their strengths and weaknesses, and that's what medical schools see as well. And give yourself adequate time to study for the MCAT, but don't give yourself way too much time where like you're studying for like a whole year and then you burn yourself out by the time your test comes. So like you have to gauge how much time you need, and then also I would say start earlier than later. Just in case, like, you have to take it again, or something happens and you have to push back your test date. I think it's better to plan ahead for that. So, do you need research? That's kind of up in the air, I would say. More, is it required? No. Does it look really good? Yes. Especially now in the COVID era where we see that our healthcare system is based off of research, like medicine and healthcare and how we treat patients is based off of medicine. It doesn't necessarily have to be like wet lab where you're sitting at a bench, but it can be like meta-analyses where you're doing like data construction and collecting data and stuff of that sort. So yes, I would say that research is really important. But like I said before, if your MCAT and your GPA are not strong, then like having good research, having volunteering, having shadowing, all of that, it looks great, but it will not like make up for a bad MCAT or a bad GPA. And then the second part to the question, how do you get research opportunities? So I did research at UTD for about like 2.5 years. I just contacted faculty. Like, I think one of the lessons that I learned yesterday, literally from a mentor, was that we as pre-med and medical students, like, we take no so easily as an answer. Like, oh, okay, they said no, so they must not have any opportunities. If they say no, maybe you should try showing up to their office. Maybe you should, okay, the worst that they can say is like, go home, like we really don't have any opportunities. But you can ask them, hey, okay, you don't have any opportunities. Do you know if someone has opportunities? If they don't have that, like, you just have to like keep going door to door and asking, hey, like, can I do this? But at the same time, these like research PIs, you have to be dedicated to the research. You have to show up, like you have to dedicate time. And if you don't have that time, then maybe you should push back the research a little bit. Also, none of this is like to scare anyone or anything. This is just supposed to be like purely informative. I've screwed up a lot like along my journey. So these are just like some mistakes and advice for me as one individual. Like you can ask another 500 medical students and they'll give you like 500 individual pieces of advice. So yeah, take it with a grain of salt. I say that about my advice and about everyone's advice. It's just, it has a very personal and biased factor. So yeah, that's my spiel. But moving on, how difficult is it for international students to get into medical school? So I'm not an admissions committee or on the admissions committee, so I couldn't really tell you that. But I would say that it would be more difficult, just like seeing how it is more difficult for like foreign medical graduates to get into like residency programs. But if you have like good statistics, and you take your like core classes, your pre-med classes in the US system, I think you can be qualified. But If you do have questions regarding that, I would say that you should call up admissions committees themselves and talk to them. They're more accessible than we think they are. If you have questions, just call their offices and you can ask them directly. So you will never see like the hours that you need for volunteering, for research, for your clinical experiences, your non-clinical experiences. You'll never see a number published anywhere. And if it is like on an official medical school website, and like there's Student Doctor Network and like Reddit and all that stuff that has like hypothetical numbers. A lot of them are successful, medical students that got in. I would say there's not really a minimum or a maximum, but I would say that you need to have all those components on your application. So I would say like for shadowing, you should have like around 100 or plus, minimum shadowing hours, and then your clinical, non-clinical, I would also say like 100, 150, because you're looking at approximately like within 3 years, right? Like your fourth year, technically, if you're doing like the traditional route, your fourth year doesn't really count because by that time you've already applied. And then I would also put in like research, I would say plays a heavy role. It's not something required, but I think looks really good. And somewhere around like 250, 300, I would say is a good number to start with. The only reason why I'm saying all these is because I think a lot of you, this is just an assumption, but correct me if I'm wrong, want to go to medical schools that are closer by or like within Texas. Like we have about 12 or 13 schools. So Texas does have a fairly competitive like applicant pool. So you want to make yourself as competitive of an applicant as possible. So I guess this is $1 million question. I don't really have much advice on this because unfortunately I didn't apply, or fortunately I didn't apply in the COVID era. But what I would say is like, now that like we're in this pandemic for like 6, 7 months, and it's probably going to continue for a little bit of time, unfortunately, that they are going to say, like, they will give you a little bit of grace because, you're not having those in-person activities that you could, like shadowing or volunteering. But you should still, like, look for online opportunities to volunteer, or, like, if they have, like, COVID-friendly ways that you can come in and shadow or come in and do some volunteering activity, you definitely should pursue those because I think they will still look for those on the application. What qualities do they now want? I would say that they're definitely going to ask you about COVID during your interviews, and like they would expect that somewhere in your essays as well, and like how you adapted to it and what you did during that time, like if you took on a hobby or worked during the COVID era. And then also like they would expect your knowledge about COVID as well. I would expect them to ask you that during interviews. So it definitely does take time to adjust in the beginning because it's like, the whole you're drinking out of a fire hose analogy. It is a bit exaggerated at times. So, but like I think undergrad and medical school is not really much different. It's just you have a lot more knowledge that you have to like learn within a shorter period of time. But it's a time management game. If you have like time management skill, like really good skills with that, I think you can do anything. Like you can excel well in class, you can have a social life, you can have a family life, you can still have fun. So it's all about time management. That you might have about like joining medical school in the medical profession. you just like, you have to show your passion for it. Sorry. And like, you have to be committed for it. Like, it's not, you know, a 500 dash meter race, right? It's a marathon that you have to prepare for. So yes, like, you know, there are days where like you feel so defeated and unmotivated, but like you have to find ways to pick yourself up and keep going. And then the same advice that I gave before, like, it's really hard, but never ever ever compare yourself to someone else. So yeah. What is it like being a medical student? I mean, it's something that like I've worked towards for a really long time, and I mean, it's kind of still surreal even though it's been like over a year and a half. But it's a really rewarding experience. It is at times, you know, really overwhelming, but like you have to figure out ways to like calm yourself and like have good company and like balance your educational and professional life with like your personal life. You know, and like especially now in COVID, like taking care of your mental health and your physical health is very important. So yeah. So I think it's like, it's not a balance. It's like you find your own happy medium. So like, you know, around exam week, that's like where I don't have a social life, where I don't go out much. I'm just studying for long periods of time. And then after that, you know, the weekends and like some of the weekdays, like go hang out with friends, I'll come visit my parents and stuff. So it's, you have to find your own happy medium and you have to create your own schedule, and what works for you doesn't necessarily work for someone else, and you have to give yourself a little bit of leeway in figuring out what works and what doesn't. Have I met a medical social worker? Could you elaborate on that, whoever asked this question? But no, I have not, but I do have a cousin who's the medical social worker, so if that counts.
I was really just wondering. I mean, I'm a social worker. Well, I'm trying to be a social work student, so I was just wondering if you ever met a medical social worker.
I have not, sorry.
You're good. I was just really wondering.
So I know that like clinical experiences, like for shadowing, I would say that some doctors are allowing people to come back. You just have to call up random offices and like what specialties you're interested in, like getting exposure. Um, so yeah, you might just need to be a little more flexible because obviously there are like maximum capacities of people that can be in an area and all of that. And then clinical experiences, there might be some like online opportunities as well. There's a list of like some volunteer opportunities that I pulled up, and I'll share with you guys in the chat towards the end, that you guys can look into. So I think I said this before, but like for your clinical, non-clinical, I would aim for like about 100, 150 hours. And then your shadowing also like about 100 hours, research like 250, 300. And then leadership, I don't really know how to quantify that in hours, but I can tell you that like obviously you should have leadership. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to like be like the president of a club. Like you could, you know, be working somewhere, like you have a job, that's leadership. You can be a TA, that's leadership. You're, what else? Like you're an ambassador at UTD, that can be a leadership. Like any, like it doesn't necessarily have to be a club. It can be any like activity outside of UTD as well, where like it doesn't have to be a formal role either, to put as leadership. The thing with leadership, though, is that it has to be like longitudinal, right? Like they don't want to see that you started leadership all in your third year. Like they understand that, you know, you're adding that for fluff. But like especially if you're in like first, second year right now, I would say that, you know, start looking into opportunities where you can pick up leadership, and like if you can, you know, where it's like incremental, where you can gain more leadership positions, that's something that looks good. Another $1 million question, what's a good MCAT score? So I think like the national US average is like a 510, and Texas is one of the more competitive states. So I would say like around a 510 or above would be a good MCAT score.
I have a question. What's the maximum MCAT score?
The maximum is a 528. So it's on a scale of, I think, 472 to a 528. And like once you get above like a 520 to a 528, you're like in the 100th percentile anyways. But I would say like you should aim for at least like a 510 or above if you're looking to stay within Texas. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. And then with the shadowing, just call up doctors. You might have to call like about 30 of them just because like they're really busy, and you might not actually get a hold of a doctor, but you might get a hold of like their office manager or like their secretary or like their PA. So yeah, just call them. And same thing with like if you're looking for research, you just have to send out like 30, 40 emails until like you get a response. So yeah. So an MD letter of recommendation. So I know people who have gotten into medical school and they've had 0 like MD or DOs who are doctors of osteopathic medicine. Like they didn't have any of those recommendation letters, and they're still in like medical schools and really competitive medical schools. So I wouldn't say it's necessary, but I would say it is recommended because you're going into a field to be a doctor, right? And then if you have a someone who is already a doctor vouch for you that, you know, this person has qualities that would make them a really good doctor, I think it would look really nice. So like for those of you who are like currently juniors, like I don't really have much advice because, you know, your application cycle is like starting soon, or like in 6 months or so. I would just say like if you can try and get some shadowing now, like you still have like some adequate time to ask them for a letter of recommendation. So if you can get a hold of a doctor who will let you come into their office right now and start shadowing them, you can ask them for a letter of recommendation. Sorry, I'm also like reading the chat function at the same time.
Yeah, so we have, I think, around a little less than 4 minutes before it kicks us out. And in the case that it does, it's just going to be the same link back to the meeting. Our secretary, Lacia, she'll just restart the meeting with the same link, and everyone can just get back in through that link.
Okay, I'll try and quickly answer this question before we get kicked out. So I think there's like a big scare amongst pre-meds, and I guess I was really scared as well about the whole concept of having a gap year. If you have a gap year and you know you don't really have like a good clinical or shadowing experiences as of now, and then you take a gap year and like you do maybe 50 hours of shadowing and like 50 hours of volunteering, that's not really going to help you. Like in your gap year, like you have to load that gap year. Like, you know, you have to show that you took that gap year off, like that year off, and did a gap year, and like you did, you know, some pretty incredible things in that year. Because technically if you were still in school, you'd be taking classes, and then you would also like be doing volunteering and shadowing. So if you're taking a gap year and you're not taking classes or anything of that sort, you should like, you know, try as much as possible to fill that gap year in with good experiences, not just fluff, but like good, solid experiences. How hard was it for you to get into medical school? So what exactly do you mean by that? How hard was it? Like, yes, it was a lot of work to get into medical school. It was hard studying for my like pre-med classes and taking the MCAT. But like, you just have to keep going, and you have to, like, the biggest part is you have to believe in yourself when other people don't. And you can't let other people like shatter your hopes and dreams. So if you're really passionate about it, like, no one can take it away from you. So, and there's no like straight line to getting into med school. It's not an A to B, it's a long windy road, and everyone's path is different. So like, keep pushing hard, you'll get there. Okay, I'll look at the chat once we get back in.
Yeah, I think we're gonna get kicked out. You know, actually, we could even stop the meeting right now so that we can restart it in as soon as we can. So yeah, Lasia, we can close the meeting now, and we'll reopen it within the next minute, and it should be the same link as before.
Right.
Okay.